One day, you wake up and realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. You smile when people expect you to smile. You work because life tells you to work. You keep moving, but deep inside, something feels missing. You ask yourself, when did I become this person? When did I stop feeling alive? And how do I find myself again? The truth is, you did not disappear. You simply got buried under expectations, responsibilities, fear, and years of becoming everything for everyone else. There comes a moment in life that feels uncomfortable to admit. You are busy, but not fulfilled. You are moving, but not arriving. Your calendar is full, yet your heart feels empty. And because that emptiness feels uncomfortable, you do what most people do. You keep running. You fill every silent moment with noise. You scroll. You work longer. You answer messages immediately. You distract yourself with goals, routines, entertainment, and endless activity, because being still feels dangerous. Because silence asks questions. Silence asks, are you happy? Is this the life you wanted? Who are you becoming? And many people never stop long enough to answer. But understand this, you cannot find yourself while constantly escaping yourself. Imagine standing beside a lake during a storm. The water is shaking, crashing, moving so violently that you cannot see your reflection. That is what life becomes when every day is filled with pressure, comparison, expectations, and endless motion. Your reflection never disappeared. The water simply never became still enough for you to see it. Many people think finding yourself means traveling somewhere far away, quitting everything, changing your entire life. But often, finding yourself begins with something much simpler. Stop. Pause the constant need to prove. Pause the endless chase. Pause long enough to hear the thoughts you've been drowning out. There was a man who worked for years chasing success. Early mornings, late nights, promotions, more money, more achievement. Everyone admired him. But one evening, sitting alone in his car after another long day, he realized something terrifying. He had achieved the life he thought he wanted, and still felt empty. Not because success failed him, because somewhere along the way, he stopped asking himself what he actually wanted. He had become excellent at meeting expectations and forgotten how to listen inward. That moment changed him. He began taking walks without headphones, sitting quietly for 10 minutes every morning, writing down what he felt instead of what he needed to do. Slowly, something returned. Not excitement overnight. Recognition, his own voice. And maybe that is what you need too. Not more motivation. Not another plan. Space. 5 quiet minutes. A walk. A morning without your phone. A conversation with yourself that you've postponed for years. Because beneath the noise, your answers are still there. The dreams that mattered. The values you abandoned. The version of yourself that felt alive. You do not need to force yourself back into existence. You only need to become quiet enough to hear yourself again. Stop running. The person you are searching for may already be waiting in the silence. There is something heartbreaking that happens quietly in adulthood. You do not lose yourself in one dramatic moment. You lose yourself gradually. You stop doing the things that once made your eyes light up. You become practical, responsible, efficient. You tell yourself you'll come back to those things later. When life calms down, when work gets easier, when responsibilities become smaller. But later turns into years. And one day, you look at your life and realize something difficult. You have become good at surviving, but forgotten how to feel alive. Think back for a moment. Who were you before life became so serious? Maybe you used to draw for hours and lose track of time. Maybe you loved writing, building, dancing, learning, creating, exploring. Maybe you laughed more. Maybe you dreamed bigger. Those moments mattered, not because they were productive, but because they revealed something true about you. Children rarely ask, will this impress anyone? They ask, does this make me feel alive? And somewhere along the journey of becoming successful, accepted, and secure, many people stop asking that question. There was a woman who spent over a decade building the perfect career. She became everything she thought she should become: stable, respected, busy. But inside, she felt disconnected. One weekend, while cleaning her house, she found an old sketchbook hidden in a box. Inside were drawings she had made years earlier, page after page of ideas, imagination, color. And suddenly she remembered. She remembered who she used to be, not because drawing was her destiny, but because drawing reminded her that she once knew how to create without fear. So she started again. 10 minutes a day. No pressure, no audience, just reconnecting. And something unexpected happened. Her entire energy changed. She smiled more, thought differently, felt present again. Because she didn't rediscover a hobby. She rediscovered a part of herself. This is what people misunderstand. Finding yourself does not always mean making dramatic changes. Sometimes it means returning. Returning to curiosity. Returning to wonder. Returning to things that made time disappear. You do not need permission. You do not need to justify joy. You do not need to earn the right to do things that make your spirit breathe. Ask yourself, what did I stop doing because life became busy? What used to make me forget the world? What made me feel most like myself? And then have the courage to begin again. Badly, quietly, without perfection. Because the goal is not performance. The goal is reconnection. You may discover that the version of yourself you miss is not gone. They are waiting. Waiting inside abandoned dreams. Waiting inside forgotten passions. Waiting inside moments you convinced yourself no longer mattered. Go back. Not to become who you were, but to remember what has always been alive inside you. One of the most painful ways people lose themselves is not through failure. It is through approval. Because approval feels good. It feels safe to be accepted. It feels rewarding to be praised. It feels comforting to become the version of yourself that people celebrate. So slowly, almost invisibly, you begin adjusting. You become who your family expects. You become who society rewards. You become who your friends understand. You say yes when you want to say no. You choose security over meaning. You build a life that looks successful from the outside and feels unfamiliar on the inside. And the dangerous part is this: people may applaud you while you quietly disappear. Think about how many people are living lives they never truly chose. The student who studies a subject they never loved because they didn't want to disappoint anyone. The professional who stays in a career that drains them because leaving feels irresponsible. The person who spends years trying to be admired but never asks if they are actually fulfilled. This is how identity gets buried. Not by force, by adaptation. There was a young man who spent his entire life trying to become someone his family would be proud of. Every decision passed through one question: will they approve? He worked hard, achieved milestones, did everything right, but every achievement felt strangely empty. One day, someone asked him a simple question: if nobody could judge your decision, what would you choose? And he couldn't answer. Not because he lacked ambition, but because he had spent so many years becoming what others wanted that he no longer knew what he wanted. That question changed everything, because for the first time he realized something powerful. Acceptance and alignment are not the same thing. You can be accepted by everyone and disconnected from yourself, and you can disappoint people while becoming more honest than you have ever been. Understand this clearly. You are not here to become a perfect reflection of everyone's expectations. People will always have opinions. Too ambitious, too quiet, too emotional, too late, too different. If you try to satisfy every voice around you, eventually your own voice disappears. And then one day you wake up trapped inside a life you built for applause. But your life was never meant to be a performance. Your identity is deeper than your role. You are not only your job, not only your achievements, not only the labels people gave you. There is a part of you that existed before expectations touched your mind. Return to that place. Ask yourself difficult questions. What do I believe when nobody is watching? What matters to me if no one applauds? What choices would I make if approval disappeared? Those answers may feel uncomfortable, But discomfort is often the doorway back to truth. Because finding yourself again is not becoming rebellious. It is becoming honest. And there is incredible freedom in realizing this. You do not owe the world a version of yourself that costs you your soul. Choose a life that feels true, even if it is quieter, even if fewer people understand. Because losing approval hurts for a moment. Losing yourself hurts for years. One of the reasons people believe they have lost themselves is because they keep searching for an old version that no longer exists. They say things like, I miss who I used to be. I don't feel like myself anymore. I want my old life back. But what if the reason you feel lost is not because you disappeared? What if it is because you changed and you are trying to return to a person you were never meant to stay? This is one of the hardest truths to accept. Growth does not always feel exciting. Sometimes growth feels like confusion. Sometimes it feels like grief. Because every new version of you requires letting go of an old one. Think about a tree. Every year it grows taller, stronger, wider, but it does not carry every leaf forever. It sheds. And yet when the leaves fall, the tree is not dying. It is preparing. Human beings are no different. There are versions of you that served their purpose. The version that needed approval to feel safe. The version that stayed quiet to avoid conflict. The version that dreamed smaller because failure felt unbearable. Those versions helped you survive. But survival is not where your story ends. There was a woman who spent years identifying herself as the strongest person in every room. She never asked for help, never showed weakness, never slowed down. People admired her, but eventually life changed. She became exhausted, and she began feeling ashamed because she no longer recognized herself. She thought she was becoming weaker, but she wasn't becoming weaker. She was becoming wiser. For the first time, she was learning that strength could include softness, that rest could exist alongside ambition, that growth sometimes means becoming someone your past self would not understand. And that realization transformed her life. Listen carefully. You are not required to remain identical to who you were 5 years ago, or 1 year ago, or even 6 months ago. Your dreams may change. Your values may evolve. The things you once chased may no longer matter. That does not make you inconsistent. It makes you human. Too many people stay loyal to old identities long after they have outgrown them. They continue relationships that no longer fit, continue goals that no longer inspire, continue habits that no longer reflect who they are becoming. Not because they want to, but because changing feels like betrayal. But growth is not betrayal. Growth is honoring the person you are becoming. So stop asking, how do I become who I used to be? Ask instead, who am I becoming now? Because maybe you are not lost. Maybe life has stretched you beyond old definitions. Maybe your values have deepened. Maybe your heart has matured. Maybe your soul has become too large for the identity you once wore. Do not fear that. Welcome it. You do not owe your past self permanence. You owe your future self honesty. And sometimes finding yourself again is not returning backward. It is giving yourself permission to move forward and meet someone stronger, wiser, and more true than you have ever been before. There is a kind of heartbreak that nobody talks about. It is not when other people disappoint you. It is when you disappoint yourself so many times that you stop believing your own words. You tell yourself you will start tomorrow. Tomorrow comes. You say you will wake up early, take care of yourself, begin the project, make the change, speak up, move forward. But then you don't. Again and again. And eventually something invisible begins to break. Not your potential, your trust. Because every time you abandon your own promises, your mind quietly learns a dangerous lesson. I cannot rely on myself. And once that happens, even simple goals begin to feel impossible. People often think confidence comes first. It doesn't. Trust comes first. Confidence is built afterward. Think about someone you trust deeply. Why do you trust them? Not because they made one grand gesture. Because over time, they showed consistency. They said they would show up, and they did. They said they would try, and they tried. Trust is earned through repeated evidence. The same is true for your relationship with yourself. There was a man who constantly called himself lazy. He had books he never finished, plans he never followed, goals he never reached. He thought his problem was discipline. But one day he realized something deeper. His problem was that he no longer believed himself. Every promise felt meaningless because his own history told him he wouldn't follow through. So he changed his approach. No dramatic transformation, no impossible routine. He made one promise: wake up and walk for 10 minutes. That was it, 10 minutes. And he kept it. The next day, again, then again. Weeks passed. Slowly, something shifted. He stood differently, spoke differently, because every completed promise sent a new message. I do what I say. That identity changed everything. Understand this. Your life does not change in giant moments. It changes in repeated moments. The small promises matter. Drink the water. Read the page. Take the walk. Send the application. Turn off the phone. Go to sleep when you said you would. Not because these actions are impressive, but because they become evidence. Evidence that you are becoming someone reliable. Too many people keep making huge promises because they want immediate transformation. But every broken promise becomes another crack in self-trust. Start smaller. Win more often. Build momentum. Treat your word as something sacred. Because when you begin honoring your commitments to yourself, something powerful happens. You stop negotiating with your future. You stop waiting for motivation. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries. You become someone who follows through. And one day, without realizing it, you look back and notice you stand taller. You believe yourself again. Not because life became easier, but because you became dependable. Finding yourself again is not always a dramatic discovery. Sometimes it is quietly rebuilding the relationship you abandoned the longest. The relationship with yourself. Make one promise today. Keep it. Then do it again tomorrow. Trust is returning. And with it, so are you. There is a moment in many people's lives when they quietly make a decision without realizing it. They decide, when someone understands me, then I will feel complete. When someone believes in me, then I will trust myself. When someone stays, then I will finally feel secure. And from that moment on, they begin searching. Searching for approval. Searching for validation. Searching for someone to tell them they matter. They build their emotional home inside other people. And at first, it feels beautiful. Until people change. Until expectations shift. Until someone leaves. And suddenly everything collapses. Because when your peace depends entirely on external things, your identity becomes fragile. This is why so many people feel lost after rejection, heartbreak, failure, disappointment, or change. Not because they lost everything, but because they placed everything outside themselves. Listen carefully. People can support you. People can love you. People can inspire you. But no person should become the only place where your worth exists. You must become a place inside yourself that remains standing. There was a woman who spent years seeking validation everywhere she went. She measured herself through attention, praise, and acceptance. If people admired her, she felt valuable. If they pulled away, she questioned herself. One day, after experiencing a painful ending she never expected, she sat alone and asked a difficult question. Who am I when nobody is choosing me? At first, the silence felt unbearable, but slowly she started doing something different. She stopped abandoning herself. She kept promises to herself. She learned to sit alone without needing distraction. She stopped speaking to herself with cruelty. She started treating herself with the same patience she gave everyone else. And over time she realized something powerful. Her strength had never disappeared. She had simply outsourced it. That changed her life. Because becoming your own safe place does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean refusing love. It means knowing that even when life changes, you remain. Even when someone misunderstands you, you remain. Even when plans collapse, you remain. You become the person who says, I can feel disappointment and still stand. I can experience uncertainty and still trust myself. I can lose something important and still know who I am. That is real strength. Not never falling, but becoming someone who can return to themselves. Start creating that place. Speak to yourself with respect. Protect your energy. Keep your word. Allow rest. Forgive mistakes. Build rituals that remind you that your value is not under negotiation. Because if your inner world becomes a place of criticism, fear, and rejection, where are you supposed to rest? Your relationship with yourself should become the place you return to, not the place you escape from. And one day, life will test you. People will leave. Seasons will change. Plans will fail. But instead of breaking, you will remember, I am still here. I still belong to myself. I still know how to begin again. That is when you realize, finding yourself again was never about searching farther. It was about finally becoming the home you were looking for all along.